Hello, everyone. This is Jarl Crocker, Director of Training and Technical Assistance at the Community Action Partnership, and thank you all very much for tuning in to this afternoon or morning's webinar, depending on where you're calling in from, on customer satisfaction systems. This is the first of a two-part webinar series. We'll talk about the agenda in just a second, but just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items, and then we will go ahead and jump in with the afternoon's content. So first of all, just letting you know this webinar is being recorded. The recording of the webinar and the slides will be available on the Partnership's website within the next couple of days, and you can access recordings of previous webinars in our Organizational Standards Center of Excellence series, along with those accompanying slides on the Partnership's website at your convenience. Again, we will have the second webinar in this series at the same time in 1 week, so next Monday at 2 o'clock, so you can tune in there as well. Also, if you would like to ask questions during the webinar, everybody is muted on entrance, but you can go ahead and put those questions in through the chat or the Q&A feature. Just let us know, and I'll stop at various times, see if folks have questions, but otherwise don't hesitate to go ahead and type your questions in. You can type them in at any time, and I'll do my best to answer them as they come in. And of course, both myself and other training and technical assistance staff at the Partnership are always available to answer questions if you want to have a longer discussion offline. Our contact information is at the end of the slide deck, and of course, you can always contact us directly just by giving us a call or shooting us an email. I'm also joined by my silent partner this afternoon, Courtney Kohler, our Senior Associate. Courtney is running the mechanics of the webinar, so you can type to her directly if you have any problem with the video or the audio feature. Otherwise, the webinar recording is started, so let's go ahead and get going. So as I said, this is a two-part webinar series. We are going to spend this afternoon for the next 55 minutes or so talking about some big picture issues around customer satisfaction and talking about the overall components of your customer satisfaction system. We'll talk about the organizational standards. We'll also touch on the standards of excellence. I'll tell you what those are in just a second. And then we'll talk about the components of a customer satisfaction system, provide you with some helpful resources, discuss the successful habits of organizations that have good customer satisfaction systems in place, and give you some practical tools and exercises you can take back to your agency to support the ongoing development of your own customer satisfaction system. And what we'll do next week, again, 1 week from now, next Monday at 2 o'clock Eastern, we'll talk about designing the questions that go along with your customer satisfaction system and how the mechanics of actually gathering that customer satisfaction data work, including how you build out the structure for analyzing and reporting that data. So please join us next week as well. So to talk a little bit at the beginning about some key resources. I know that your time is precious and we're all busy in community action, but if you were just going to read 3 resources about customer satisfaction, the ones up on the screen are what I would recommend. These are available on the web. You can just type in the title and the first thing that should pop up will be a PDF copy. But the first 2 are from the Center for the Study of Social Policy. That first publication, what the research tells us about improving quality and access to services and supports, is a great overview of the literature on customer satisfaction with a focus on public and nonprofit organizations. There is, of course, a significant literature on customer satisfaction. It's a core business process, certainly in many private sector organizations, but it is a little bit different in the nonprofit and the public sector. So this is a great publication that goes into detail about what the research says, about what components of a customer satisfaction system you should have, and it also provides some excellent case studies and other reports from the field about organizations that have highly effective customer satisfaction systems. That second publication, the Customer Satisfaction Framework, describes what an ideal customer satisfaction system looks like. So it puts together those case studies and broader literature review and provides you with a how-to framework for building out your customer satisfaction system. And then the last publication from the Urban Institute talks about surveying clients about outcomes. It's a very, I think, handy document. It gets into the mechanics of how you would put together the surveys. And so taken together, I think these are some of the best publications out there specifically for the nonprofit sector around customer satisfaction. Much of the materials on this webinar are taken from those resources. And so again, if you just read three things, I think these are some of the best resources out there to help you continue to improve your customer satisfaction system. So next I want to talk about the organizational standards and the standards of excellence. So two sets of standards to help you think about the components of your customer satisfaction system. So first off, what we have up on the screen is a shot of the partnership webpage. There are two places you can get the resources that I'm going to describe from you. First of all, the Programs tab, that's the first one circled in yellow, is where you can get more information on the partnership's Standards of Excellence and our Pathways to Excellence program. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but it's a handy resource when you're thinking about organizational development in general, and we'll talk about some of the standards of excellence that are focused specifically on customer satisfaction. That second link in yellow that's circled, our tools and resources, is where you can get our resources for the organizational standards and ROMA, two things that I will talk about in more detail a little bit later on in the presentation. But you can access all of the resources that the partnership has developed to help our agencies make sure that they are complying with the organizational standards, and I'll talk to you about what resources are available there. But those are the two first places you can go to get practical tools, guidelines, links to past webinars that we've done, and almost all the materials that I'm going to talk about this afternoon, aside from those three publications that I showed you in the previous slide. So to begin with, let's talk about the organizational standards related to customer satisfaction. So there are two main standards that mention your customer satisfaction system. The primary one is Standard 1.3, and what I've done is highlighted in red and put some numbers up in front because in some ways this is a straightforward standard, but it does have a number of moving parts. So I wanted to talk through all four components that you would need to show that you are in compliance with Standard 1.3. So first off, the standard asks you to have a systematic approach. And we'll cover some of what a systematic approach is this afternoon. We'll also talk about it next week. But basically a systematic approach, I think, sort of strongly implies, and of course different state offices may interpret this a little bit differently, but a systematic approach means that you are regularly collecting customer satisfaction data, ideally that you would have policies and procedures for conducting it, and a structure or an individual in place who's responsible for looking at that data from time to time, reporting on it, making recommendations. So in other words, instead of an ad hoc approach, there is a clear policy, process, and structure that functions to collect, analyze, and report on your customer satisfaction data. And we'll talk in a little bit more detail next week about what that structure would look like. And I'm going to cover more about sort of having those policies and procedures in place and what sort of making that system, at least initially, work would look like. The second part of the standard says that you have to collect your customer satisfaction data. We understand that many agencies just simply don't have the internal capacity to routinely collect customer satisfaction data across all of their programs and services, although that would certainly be the ideal situation. But we interpret the standard to mean that you are at least collecting some information some of the time from your programs and services. Again, ideally that's happening as broadly as possible, but you would have to, at a minimum, do some collection over the course of the year, and ask your state office for guidance if you're not quite sure if you are meeting the way they interpret that particular standard. Or part of the standard. The third component of the system that the standard asks for is that you analyze the data collected. So that's why I spoke about the importance of either having an individual or a structure in place, such as a quality improvement committee, that regularly looks at the data. Now, of course, the standard doesn't say how often you have to analyze that data. So I would say at a minimum, as long as you are analyzing that data on an annual basis, you would be in compliance with the standard. But of course, our hopes are that agencies are able to analyze that data more frequently. I think a monthly or at least a quarterly analysis of your customer satisfaction data is probably going to get you the best information. If you wait too long, it might be out of date, and it just means you're not able to act on that data as quickly as you would probably like to. And then the fourth component is reporting. So you actually have to report on that on the customer satisfaction data to your governing board. And even though the standard doesn't say it, I would hope that you would be reporting to your leadership team as well, if it's not your leadership team that's actually doing the analysis. And again, I would think reporting to your board on at least an annual basis would mean that you are in compliance with this particular standard. But again, I would suggest quarterly reports where you would at least do a quick summary of what that customer satisfaction data shows. But again, check with your state office to make sure that they have a clear description of what it means, because some of the language in this particular standard, again, is not prescriptive in terms of the frequency for things like collecting and analyzing data. So make sure that you're clear with your state office about what their expectations are. But I would think sort of the minimum standard would be this happens on an annual basis. But of course, we encourage you to collect more frequently and analyze your data more frequently than that, as long as your internal capacity allows that level of effort. The next standard, 6.4, is that customer satisfaction data and customer input collected as part of the community assessment is included in the strategic planning process. So again, if you are collecting your customer satisfaction data on at least an annual basis, although as I said, hopefully more frequently than that, it should be relatively straightforward to meet this particular standard because you wouldn't have to collect it, especially for your needs assessment. You would just be collecting it as a matter of course, and you would use that customer satisfaction data along with other data collected for your needs assessment as you move into your strategic planning process. But as long as you've got that basic system in place, Standard 6.4, I think, is relatively straightforward to me. You just have to remember to make sure that you're using your customer satisfaction data as part of the data that you're looking at as you develop your strategic plan. Next, I want to turn to our standards of excellence. So the organizational standards are the basic requirements that agencies in our network need to meet to show their alignment with sort of basic good principles of management and operations. The standards of excellence, however, are specific standards developed by our network that are really meant to be the gold standard. So if the organizational standards are sort of the basics that you would need to comply with, we suggest our agencies at least take a look at the standards of excellence, which are the highest standards that an agency can aspire to. This doesn't necessarily mean, and of course, I just want to stress, these standards are voluntary. They are part of our Pathways to Excellence program, where agencies go through and benchmark themselves against our organizational standards. And these standards are derived from the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, which is actually an internationally recognized program for excellence in management and operations that is open for applications to private, nonprofit, and public sector organizations. So there's an interesting literature around the National Quality Award, great case studies of excellence in management and operations, so that in and of itself is a good resource. but the standards of excellence are used by our agencies as part of our pathways process. Agencies benchmark themselves against these standards, and then they compile a self-study that's 55 pages long. That's reviewed by a panel of expert peer reviewers. Those are trained every year at our annual convention. Those are folks with at least 5 years of management experience. And the peer reviewers provide a feedback report to the agency that details its strengths and its opportunities for improvement. We're going to be announcing a Pathways training very shortly that'll be coming up in a couple of months in Dallas, Texas. So if that is something your agency is interested in, be on the lookout for that, and I'm more than happy to provide you additional information. Just shoot me an email. So with that said, the standards of excellence in Category 3 around customer focus are the ones related to customer satisfaction, and I just wanted to mention those because I think they're a helpful resource for thinking about what a fully developed customer satisfaction system looks like. Again, these are not required. These are voluntary. The organizational standards are the ones that you have to comply with. These are part of a voluntary system for agencies that are benchmarking themselves, but I think a helpful resource for thinking about what a fully developed customer satisfaction system looks like. So standard 3.1 of our standards for excellence talk about what a fully developed customer satisfaction system looks like, and you'll notice that these are obviously much more elaborated and much more detailed, and so specifically what I wanted to call out here is that customer satisfaction is more than just the customers that you are serving directly through your programs and services. A truly excellent customer satisfaction system would also collect that customer satisfaction data from your partners and key stakeholders. So for example, you might annually bring together your core partners, maybe the other agencies or organizations that you have referral networks with or work together around advocacy or community collaborative work or community level work, and just simply collect feedback from them about their perceptions of how you're doing as an agency. It doesn't have to be anything more complex than that, but it's just good practice if you're also collecting that feedback from your key partners about how they feel about your organization's performance. The same thing is also true of your investors or funding sources, so asking for their feedback on an annual basis can be a very helpful exercise. It can strengthen that relationship and provide you with key ideas, any particular issues that they bring up that you might need to address to be able to maintain that funding source. So again, thinking about customer satisfaction and who is your customer extends beyond the immediate folks that you serve. And then lastly, the standard calls out the community as a whole. And so perhaps as part of your needs assessment process every 3 years, you might collect some data from the broader community about your agency or about what the broader community perceives about programs, the types of programs and services that you provide. So I think just a helpful reminder that customer satisfaction is much more broadly defined than just the folks that you're directly providing your programs and services to. 3.2, the next standard in the standard of excellence, talks about how you systematically track and report on this data, and I think this is a good description of what a fully built out system would actually look like, that you are systematically collecting your customer satisfaction data, you're looking at trends over time, and you are collecting that data across multiple groups of stakeholders. So I think just, again, the standard provides you with something to think about and compare the system that you currently have in place to this particular standard. 3.3 talks about the importance of internal improvement. And of course, your customers are also internal as well. Staff can be customers. Folks use your HR system. They use your information management system. So thinking internally about how you work with your internal customers is also important. So for example, doing employee satisfaction surveys would be another important part of a truly excellent customer satisfaction system, and as we'll see a little bit later on, making sure your frontline staff feel respected, feel supported, is a crucial component of making your customer satisfaction system work. And then finally, Standard of Excellence 3.4 talks about looking at your external partnerships and discusses the importance of making sure that, probably on an annual basis you're taking a look at the other organizations and other networks that you partner with, make sure that you're getting what you need out of those partnerships, and are keeping track of what those do to support your agency's mission and its programs and services. So again, it's not required that you use any of the standards of excellence, but they're just a helpful benchmark for helping your agency think about, as it continues to work through building out its customer satisfaction system, what a fully developed and deployed system would look like. And just a reminder here that the overall system of customer satisfaction is a critical part of our results-oriented management and accountability framework. I think doing customer satisfaction is implementing ROMA. It's providing you with critical data on how your programs and services are doing. It's crucially important data into planning your programs. And conducting ongoing improvements as you look at where your strengths and opportunities for improvement are based on that customer feedback. So I think your ROMA trainers and implementers are a key source of internal support as you're working with your customer satisfaction system. And so make sure that you're using your internal resources and thinking about customer satisfaction as part of your overall agency commitment to fully implementing the ROMA cycle. And this slide, I think, is just a way of thinking about sort of the ongoing work that you do with your customer satisfaction system. So most agencies that I talk to are still sort of somewhere along a continuum of fully building out their customer satisfaction system. They may collect some data from some programs some of the time, but maybe not necessarily in a routine way. Some of the analysis may happen at the program level, but they may not have a staff person or a quality improvement committee or similar body that meets regularly to look at that data. So there's usually something going on around customer satisfaction, but the overall system isn't completely integrated and connected with overall agency performance management efforts. And so I think when I talk to agencies about customer satisfaction, some of the first questions people ask me are, what are the 5 questions we put on our comment card, or how do we collect the data from our customers? And that's obviously a crucially important part of having an effective customer satisfaction system, but I think customer satisfaction is much broader than that, and it's a core part of your agency's overall commitment to quality improvement, looking for ways that it can continue to improve its programs and services, and thinking about how you're aligning your customer satisfaction data with broader efforts at performance management. And so one of the themes that we'll be talking about both today and on the webinar next week is the importance of thinking about your system as a whole, building out your internal systems, working to collect that data from external customers, not just the customers you're providing direct services to, but also your key partners, your funder, and the community, and making sure that you're using that data to improve your programs and services, looking for those opportunities to use feedback from your customers to make those incremental improvements in your agency. And I think it's just a good lesson thinking about how you can improve the system step by step, make it a little bit better every year. And I think with that kind of effort, over the course of several years, you can probably build out a much more developed customer satisfaction system. And so, of course, this slide shows you sort of what the perfect system would look like. There is overall alignment of your customer satisfaction work with your overall performance management efforts, and it's all directed towards your agency mission and goals, and of course, ultimately achieving better outcomes for our customers, and that's ultimately what it's about as a community action agency. So we are starting out big picture with today's webinar, talking about what you need to have in place, the basics and the fundamentals for aligning your system to produce better outcomes. So what I want to, first of all, check in, see if there are any questions that have come in through chat.
Jarl, I'm not seeing any at this point.
Okay. So again, please feel more than free to put those questions into the chat or Q&A box, and we can answer them as we go. And of course, you can always reach out to me directly if you want to have a longer discussion offline. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about the components of a customer satisfaction system and its key principles and practices. And much of this information is taken from the Center for the Study of Social Policy documents that I showed you at the beginning of the webinar. And what CSSP did as part of their work around customer satisfaction was to survey about 100 organizations that have been recognized for good quality improvement and customer satisfaction efforts. And so what I'm going to describe to you now is taken from an empirical study based on organizations, both nonprofits and public sector, that had been recognized as especially effective around doing good customer satisfaction and quality improvement work. So I wanted to start out with just a big picture discussion and a note on language. And so, you know, we talk about customer satisfaction, but I hear agencies around the country use different words to describe the folks they serve with their programs. Some folks use the word client, others talk about participants, and certainly it's not mandated that you call the folks that you serve by any particular name, but I am certainly partial to calling the folks we serve customers for a number of reasons. I think for me, most importantly, the two most important things are that when you call someone a customer, it implies that there's an obligation to listen to feedback and to serve the folks that you are providing those programs to. So I think it's aligned with the overall ethics and philosophical orientation of our broader community action network. And I think it just reminds both staff at your programs and the folks that they're working with that they value the feedback that they get from the folks that they are providing those services to. I also think a customer avoids some of the stigma that might come along with other labels. Certainly, everybody is a customer, often multiple times a day, and so it is more neutral language, and I think it's maybe a little bit more democratic language because it again emphasizes the importance of serving and listening to the people that you're providing those programs to. So this is something that you can talk about at your agency. It's a good way to get your staff reflecting about customer service and how they're working with the folks that they serve. And so I would encourage you to have that conversation as part of your ongoing efforts to continue to develop your customer satisfaction and overall quality improvement system. Next I want to note a few important things about why customer satisfaction is important, and I think it goes far beyond just simply meeting an organizational standard, and the most important factor is the first one at the top of the list. Good customer service directly affects the ability of our customers to access and use the services that we provide. Many of the folks that we serve are disenfranchised. They might feel like they have been discriminated against in other interactions, either with public or nonprofit or private sector service providers. And so good customer service is one of the most crucial factors in making sure that people coming in for services feel welcome and respected, feel like that service is being provided in a safe and supportive environment, and therefore are more likely to come back to either continue to receive that service, get additional services, or refer friends, families, or other folks in their community to their agency. So for me, that's the number one reason why customer service and customer satisfaction is so important. It's about making sure the people that we serve feel like we are a good place to get programs and services, and therefore will continue to use our services if they are needed, and to tell other folks about the services that we provide. I see we have a quick question that's just come in. Does the partnership customer and employee satisfaction surveys have any templates for us to use? In the webinar next week, I'm going to provide you with lists of questions that you can ask. show you some examples of other customer satisfaction surveys. So yes, coming up next week, we will have some more examples of templates. And if you just want to shoot me an email directly, we're putting together some additional resources, templates from other agencies. We'll make sure to get those resources up on the website, but I'm more than happy to send those out to you if you'd like. So just shoot me an email and I can provide you with those resources. I think, as I mentioned, another reason why customer satisfaction systems are so important is it's critically important to the continuous improvement of our services. So your customer satisfaction data is one of the best sources of information about whether your programs and services are working. And so if you're not collecting that customer satisfaction data routinely, you're less able to see if there are any issues that need to be addressed or strengths that you can build on or maximize. So Roma, for me, the heart of Roma are things like your customer satisfaction system, because you're collecting that data to look at opportunities for continuous improvement in your programs and services. Of course, data is also a key component of the needs assessment and strategic planning process. So your customer satisfaction data, especially if you collect it and look at it over time, looking at those trends, over the past year or two, provide you with some important information as you enter into your community needs assessment and strategic planning processes. As I also mentioned, collecting that customer satisfaction data helps to empower the individuals and families we serve, because it gives them an opportunity to have a say in our programs and services. That's one of the philosophical and value commitments of community action that we represent and act on, the voice of the low-income community, and being able to provide that customer feedback is one of the most direct ways to make sure that the interests of the communities that we serve are directly represented and taken into account in our services. And of course, the last reason is that it is required by the organizational standards, but I think for me, the fact that it's one of the most crucial determinants of access to services is the most important reason. So these are also things to talk with staff about. Stress that this customer satisfaction is more than a data collection requirement. It's about an overall philosophical and ethical commitment to serve the folks that we are dedicated to serving as community action agencies. So a couple of other big picture things to point out. I think this is a really helpful quote from Peter Drucker. What satisfies the needs, wants, and aspirations of our customers is so complicated that it can only be answered by our customers themselves. And I think just an important reminder that that's why we collect data, because our customers are diverse, they have different needs. And even though we have a lot of experience as community action agencies, knowing what drives customer satisfaction, knowing what the specific needs of our customers are, has to start with asking them. And so I think that's just an important reminder why we need to collect this data, because our customers are different, and it makes a big difference in our services to be able to answer the question, who are our customers and what do they value? This quote from Philip Kotler from Northwestern University, I think, is another important lesson. Many organizations are very clear about the value they'd like to deliver, but they often don't understand the value of what they deliver from the customer's point of view. And so measuring customer satisfaction, not just at that initial point of interaction when somebody first walks in our doors, although that's important, it's also important to measure customer satisfaction after we've provided the services to see what kind of impact they had. And so we'll talk about at what points in time you collect that customer service data. But I think collecting customer service data on how our customers feel about the services that they've received is another crucially important part of the system as a whole. So again, just a reminder that who our customers are is more than the people that we're providing those direct services to, but the rest of our webinar will, of course, focus on the individuals and families that we are directly serving as community action agencies, but just something to think about as you continue to discuss and work on your customer satisfaction system, looking for those opportunities to also get feedback from your partners, from your funders, and from the community as a whole. And of course your staff as well, and we'll talk a little bit more a bit later on in the webinar about that. So next, what is customer satisfaction? What are some of the, where does customer satisfaction come from? And I think it's important to note up front that customer satisfaction is a highly personal assessment that is strongly affected by customer expectations. So knowing what your customers expect when they walk in the door is crucially important information to have, because then you know what exactly they're looking for, what's going to make them feel like they've been listened to, that they're satisfied with your programs and services, and the only way you can do that is to ask them, right? Secondly, customer satisfaction is strongly influenced by the contact with the service provider and personal outcomes. And I know that that seems like, relatively common sense, findings there from some of the studies that have been done, but I do think it underscores the importance of those initial interactions with our customers and knowing how your customers feel about what they were ultimately able to achieve by getting the service from your agency. And as I've said, research shows that customer satisfaction is strongly influenced by confirmation or disconfirmation of your customers' expectations. So that's why it's really important to know what folks are looking for as they come in your door by collecting that information. Customer satisfaction is also related to the ability of customers to hold the organization accountable. So as I said, a good customer satisfaction system empowers your customers by giving them a voice in how your programs and services are delivered. And so good customer satisfaction shows the people that you serve your agency's commitment to listening to the voice of the low-income community and continuously improving your services based on their feedback. So again, continuing with the big picture, there are three main elements of a customer satisfaction system. One of the most common questions I get when I do trainings on customer satisfaction is, when do you collect customer satisfaction data? And I think ideally you are collecting your customer satisfaction data at 3 points in time. The first point is that initial experience when somebody walks in your door to get screened, to do that initial contact, to get referred to a program or service or another community partner. So the first time you're collecting customer satisfaction data is that first interaction that happens. The next point in time you're collecting that data is after your customer has received the program or service, because you want to know, were they actually satisfied with the service that was provided? And so at this point, you're probably tailoring these particular questions to the individual program or service. You would need to get specific information sort of based on the programs and services your customers were receiving. But again, that's another point in time where it's important to collect that data. And then the third point in time would be after, say, 3, 6, 9, or 12 months, sort of different periods probably depending on the types of programs, to see what kind of outcomes that your customers have ultimately achieved after they've received the service. And so we understand that agencies don't always have the internal capacity to be collecting all of this data all of the time. So this is an ideal framework for when you would be collecting your customer satisfaction data. You may collect some of this data anyway as part of reporting requirements. So many of your programs and services might ask you to collect data after your customers have received the service. Some of them may ask you to collect that outcome data. Again, this is just a good framework for helping you and your agency think about at what points in time are you collecting that information, because it's going to tell you very different stories about your customer's experience with your agency. So these are some of the primary service quality factors that affect the customer's experience of receiving services at your agency. Now, I'm not going to go through every one, but I think these are important because, first of all, these are things to discuss with staff. How are we doing in each of these particular areas, say around timeliness and convenience or personal attention? These also would form the basis of some of the questions that you might ask as part of your surveys that you're getting from your customers. But these are the factors that research has shown are especially critical drivers of the overall experience somebody has receiving programs and services. So these, I think, are concrete issues that you can go back, talk to your agency about, look at what you're doing in terms of providing customer service in relation to these factors, and look at the questions that you're asking in your customer surveys to see if they're getting at customer feedback around these various points. So next, I want to talk about 5 general operating principles. And as I've said, customer service, customer satisfaction is more than just about the comment cards that we give to our customers. It's about a total agency commitment to providing good customer service, and I think more broadly, a continuous focus on quality improvement, getting at least incrementally better at how we provide our programs and services. So these principles are taken from the study that the Center for the Study of Social Policy conducted with about 100 nonprofit and public sector agencies based on interviews that were conducted and other research. And so these are good benchmarks for thinking about where you are in terms of continuing to develop your agency's customer satisfaction system. So the first principle is that successful customer service companies listen to, understand, and respond, often in unique and creative ways, to the evolving needs and constantly shifting expectations of their customers. So think about how flexible your system is in terms of the ability of your staff to respond to your customers. You may shift who you're providing services to. You may start to serve different demographics, and so that's critically important to note, because different folks are going to have different expectations. They might have different needs for your programs and services, so having that flexibility in your customer satisfaction system and the ability of staff to respond to your customers' needs is crucially important. Secondly, high-performing organizations establish a clear vision of what superior service is, communicate that vision to employees at every level, and ensure that service quality is personally and positively important to everyone in the organization. So you can reflect on what are you doing to emphasize the importance of customer satisfaction to staff at all levels, frontline staff, managers, leadership team, and the board. And you can ask yourself, what kind of vision and standards do you have for customer satisfaction? In just a couple slides, we'll give you some exercises that you can do back at your organization. But one thing to reflect on is, do you have service standards for providing services to your customers? How do you communicate those expectations to your staff? The third principle is that these high-performing organizations establish concrete standards of service quality and regularly measure themselves against those standards. They guard against the common mindset that some margin of error is acceptable by establishing as their goal 100% performance. So a couple things to ask. First of all, do you have a target for your customer satisfaction results? Do you shoot for 80%, 90%, 100%? In terms of customer satisfaction? So is that something in the same way your agency would regularly target outcomes that they hope to achieve in terms of the programs and services they provide? Do you do the same thing for what level of customer satisfaction you're getting in terms of the feedback from the folks that you're serving, and how are you communicating that to staff? Is there a clear expectation around standards for the quality of service and what kind of results you're getting when it comes to your customer satisfaction feedback? A fourth operating principle is that successful agencies carefully hire people, train them extensively so they have the knowledge and skills to achieve the service standards, and then empower them to work on behalf of customers, whether inside or outside the organization. So when you think about your hiring process, do you ask questions about customer satisfaction? Do you look for staff who might have some quality improvement or customer satisfaction backgrounds? In the onboarding process, how are you communicating the importance of customer satisfaction to new staff, and what kind of training are you providing on a regular basis to build the capacity of your staff to provide high-quality customer service. So things to talk about, especially with your HR staff, in terms of hiring and then training and supporting staff to achieve that high level of customer satisfaction. And finally, the fifth principle is that high-performing organizations recognize and reward service accomplishments, sometimes individually, sometimes as a group effort, in particular celebrating the successes of employees who go one step beyond the expected actions of. Ask is, what are you doing at your agency to recognize staff that have a commitment to customer satisfaction, that provide especially good service to your customers? Do you have incentives perhaps built into employee job descriptions or as part of annual review? Do you provide a space for staff who go above and beyond to talk about what they're doing? Do you recognize those stories, say, at your monthly staff meeting? Do you encourage folks who go above and beyond to share what they do, to do some internal staff development? So again, I think just some good concrete suggestions for things to think about how you're building not just the mechanical components of your customer satisfaction system, but your overall organizational culture and your system to support quality improvement and providing high quality customer service. So these principles go along with some concrete components that it suggests that agencies should think about developing or incorporating into their customer satisfaction system. So these give you some more concrete ideas for things that you can do back at your agency to strengthen that culture of quality improvement and also to continue to build out your customer satisfaction system. So first off, many of the organizations that were studied in that Center for Social Study, Center for the Study of Social Policy survey of high-performing organizations found was that organizations that are committed to customer satisfaction communicate that commitment through a vision or a mission statement related to what they're trying to achieve in their customer service. And so a mission statement or a vision statement for what kind of service you're trying to provide your customers can help focus and guide employee action. It can also set and manage customer expectations. So having your customer-focused vision or your customer mission prominently displayed in places where your customers congregate or are served can reinforce your agency's commitment both to your customers and also your staff. And it's also important to instilling that culture of customer orientation because it provides clear standards of what type of service that you're trying to provide as an agency to your customers. So there are a couple of examples up on the screen. The Marriott in San Antonio, Texas, has as its customer satisfaction vision statement, every guest leaves satisfied. It's very straightforward, to the point, and it tells you exactly what that company's goal is in terms of providing high-quality customer service. I especially like the example from St. Luke's, which is a hospital system in Kansas City, which states the best place to get care, the best place to give care. And what I like about that vision statement is it clearly communicates what they're trying to accomplish for their customers, but it also includes their employees. It says they're committed to providing high-quality employee satisfaction because satisfied employees provide higher quality customer service. So this is an exercise that you can go through with your staff as part of building that commitment to quality improvement and customer satisfaction. Have your staff collectively develop what their mission or vision statement is for their customer service. That can be a very empowering exercise to go through, and it also helps get that staff buy-in to that continuous dedication to continuous improvement in your programs and services. The second component of these high-performing organizations is that customer-oriented organizational culture. And as the first bullet points out, this often entails a shift away from what's convenient for your agency to what's convenient to the customer. So a couple of examples here that I've heard from workshops that I've done across the country, thinking about things like where your service centers are located, what hours they're open, how easy it is for a customer to contact or get direct feedback from a staff person. Those are some of the fundamental things that affect customer satisfaction, again, affect the likelihood that someone is going to continue to access services or come back. And so thinking about, from the customer's perspective, what is convenient, what is helpful for the customer. As the slide also states, it requires multiple methods and strategies. So the surveys and feedback instruments, your comment cards, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You also need to be collecting data from your employees. Your staff, especially your frontline staff, are probably some of the best sources of information about how well you're doing in terms of customer service. And also, as I stated earlier, making sure that staff are satisfied and that your staff have an opportunity to provide their feedback about what could be improved is also crucially important. As we've discussed, making sure there's training in place that can support staff is important. Providing those incentives and reinforcements, so things like a day off for the employee of the month, building in performance incentives into programs that achieve high levels of customer satisfaction, recognizing employees who go above and beyond. These are all important things for building that organizational culture. And of course, making sure when you do your needs assessment and your strategic planning process that you're incorporating your customer satisfaction data. A third component to making sure you have high quality customer service is that attention to total customer experience. So one of the most helpful exercises to conduct as an agency is what's called a customer walkthrough. So having someone, it can be an actual customer that you ask to do this exercise, it could be another staff person, go through the experience of getting a service from your agency, from literally driving in to the parking lot of the agency, going through the front door, filling out forms. So seeing what that looks like from the customer perspective. It's often helpful to have somebody do this who hasn't received services, so they bring a fresh set of eyes. So again, it can be perhaps a customer that you provide some incentives to help you with this exercise. It could be a staff person going through this exercise. But again, you're looking at the entirety of the experience from the interactions that you have with the staff at the front desk, to the physical condition of the building. Is the waiting room well maintained? Is it well lit? Does it feel safe and warm and inviting? Is there good signage up that directs you? Is somebody there to help you fill out a form? All those little details that collectively add up to make a huge impact on that customer experience. So again, some of the things that often come out of these customer walkthrough exercises is the importance of that personal contact. So, for example, we collect a lot of information on our customers. You probably have their birth date, so just simply remembering, if somebody comes in and it is their birthday, to wish them a happy birthday, or even just simply calling them by their name. Those little personal touches make a huge difference. And again, looking at your overall system and how your internal processes work. So looking at how long it takes to fill out forms. Do you make people fill out, provide the same information in 3 different forms where there might be a way to streamline that? Do you have a universal intake system, or are you still asking for applications program by program where there might be ways to streamline that process? But again, that total customer experience and doing that customer walkthrough exercise can often provide you with valuable information about how well you're actually providing that customer service, especially with that initial interaction with somebody who's receiving services. A fourth practice of these highly effective organizations was a commitment to customer service standards and accountability. And as that first bullet says, behavioral change requires standards and not suggestions. And so one of the ways that these highly effective companies provide high-quality customer service is to have a very clear set of customer service standards. And so up on the screen are some examples of ones taken from companies that were participating in the CSSP study. But what I would suggest is that staff collectively should develop their customer service standards. I think it works better rather than simply imposing on staff a set of standards, to have them come together to talk about what kind of standards should inform the service they provide your customers, what's reasonable, what might need maybe a little extra training and support. But again, the more you can involve your staff in the development of your customer satisfaction system, its principles and practices, I think the more buy-in you get, ultimately the more supportive the staff are, and I think the higher quality of service that you're ultimately going to end up with. But again, one of the things you can do back at your agencies is to have staff develop those customer service standards, talk about how to apply them, put them into your policies and procedures, discuss them at staff meetings. It's a great way to make sure you're setting the tone, providing clear expectations, and making sure staff know what is high-quality customer service. And then fifth, focus on frontline staff is crucially important. And I think the bottom line is if your staff are dissatisfied or unhappy, if they feel frustrated or that there's no way for them to provide feedback, you're just, I think, naturally going to see lower levels of customer satisfaction. Happy staff, satisfied staff mean happier, more satisfied customers. And so at the very top, the golden rule is treat your employees well. And good customer service often requires flexibility. Your staff need to know that they've got that time and space to go that extra mile. So I was just at a training last week, and one of the folks from the agency there told a story about a senior customer who was having physical therapy, having trouble getting from her car to her front door. She was receiving a service for a food program from the agency, and a staff person went out of their way to get the customer a shopping cart that she could use to simply get the food she had received from the food pantry from her car to her front door. It was just a little extra step, but it meant a lot to the customer. And that staff person went the extra mile. It wasn't required for them to do that. It was just a issue that they were able to see from talking to the customer, that they were having trouble getting their groceries in the door. So they figured out a solution, went out, got them a shopping cart, and it made for a much happier customer. So making sure staff know that they've got the flexibility to do those things is and also make sure that you're rewarding staff who do go above and beyond. Also important to emphasize customer satisfaction in the hiring process. So when you're interviewing staff, talk about what customer satisfaction means to them, ask if they've had customer satisfaction training, and also I almost guarantee you that you have staff who come who might have a background, say in the service industry where customer satisfaction is really emphasized. You probably have some staff with some capacity to help you think through how to create better customer satisfaction. So make sure you're tapping staff as part of this overall process. Also, think about how you incorporate customer satisfaction in the orientation process. Talk to your HR staff about how your onboarding is working. Look at what kind of training you're providing. Ask your employees what kind of training would be especially helpful. There may be opportunities to tap supports from the community. You may be able to get slots in a customer service training, maybe at a private sector organization that they would just simply donate a few seats at a training that they're doing for your staff to go through. So look for those opportunities to continue to build staff capacity. And of course, make sure that you're recognizing and rewarding good staff performance. So these are just some sample survey questions that you might ask staff around their ability to provide input for your customer service system. And I think an employee survey, ideally done on an annual basis, is also an important component of your quality improvement system as a whole. Seeing what your staff are thinking about their levels of satisfaction, I think, is very important. Another agency that I was talking to has an advisory committee made up of frontline staff and managers that meet on a quarterly basis to talk about quality issues, provide feedback to senior management. So creating those opportunities to get that feedback from staff, I think, is crucially important. So this last slide just provides you some suggestions to think about other sources of support you might go to. I think one of the challenges with customer satisfaction is it can be seen as a quote-unquote extra. A lot of funding streams don't provide any additional support, say for training or developing different parts of your customer satisfaction system. So look to your local universities, colleges, and community colleges. I was talking with one agency that was able to get a graduate class at a business school to focus on their agency for a semester. It was a customer satisfaction quality improvement class. They got some bright graduate students in, did a number of exercises, wrote the agency a number of reports, so they were able to get free quality training around customer satisfaction and quality improvement. You can look at your local chamber of commerce, your local businesses, like I said, seeing if there might be opportunities to sit in on some other customer satisfaction trainings, maybe getting some pro bono trainings as a way to connect with some of the expertise in the private sector is another example of ways you can tap into those community resources. And of course, bringing together your fellow service providers to talk about what they're doing, how do they practice good customer service, what kind of questions do they ask, and what do their systems look like. So look to the other sources of support, especially if you're a smaller agency or don't necessarily have a significant amount of internal staff capacity or resources to spend on customer satisfaction. Look to those potential resources in your community and your networks in order to get some additional support. So the next webinar will be 1 week from today on Monday, March 5th at 2 o'clock, and we'll go into much more detail about what kind of surveys that you want to have. We'll talk about survey questions and survey designs, and what your internal structure for quality improvement will look like. So please feel more than free to reach out to me directly if you have any additional questions. Join us in 1 week. And of course, this webinar recording and slides will be up on the partnership website in the next couple of days. So thank you again for coming out to this afternoon's webinar. Hope to see you next week. And again, please don't hesitate to let myself, Courtney, or any of our other staff know if there's any other way the partnership can serve you or support the work of your agencies. So thank you all very much. Hope to see you next week, and have a great week.